That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Absolution, the 10th film directed by Hans Petter Moland, which Samuel Goldwyn Films is releasing November 1st, 2024.
Do you know any of this director's other films?
Yes, he's a Norwegian. His early work, he almost always seemed to work with Stellan Skarsgård. I do recommend Aberdeen. A Somewhat Gentle Man also was pretty well traveled. But I think a big international breakout for him was In Order of Disappearance, simply because he remade that himself in English as Cold Pursuit, starring Liam Neeson and Laura Dern. He also adapted a very notable novel, Out Stealing Horses, and now here he is again in English.
What is Absolution about? An aging gangster attempts to reconnect with his children and rectify the mistakes in his past, but the criminal underworld won't loosen their grip willingly. What's your pull quote?
Ironically, Moland's film can't be absolved of chronically bungling what appears to be a compelling narrative template in this busy-bodied character study which sabotages the assets of its supporting cast.
Agreed. Mine. It seems Moland bit off more than he can chew in this drama about forgiveness that isn't nearly as emotional or gritty as you'd want it to be.
Again, I think he's a decent director, and I also like Liam Neeson, but I don't think that this director or lead were maybe the most appropriate.
I agree. And it's a shame because I think within this, there's a really good story. Mm-hmm. And we could have kept some of the cast and made it more simple. And it really could have been a gritty, sort of heartbreaking tale. But as it is, it's like, I mean, the story's very busy. Liam seems like out of place.
Yeah. I mean, the way he's styled,
I was confused as to the timeline when we first see him.
I was like, is this 1975?
I thought it was the 70s until we see one character step into a Tesla. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, okay.
And again, I think his performance is fine. And God, it's been 16 years since he's kind of entered his Charles Bronson phase, where we've had endless amounts of films where he's a vigilante doing all kinds of things. But again, this is a little tangential to the usual for that, but I still think it's not quite as good as it should be.
Didn't he just announce he's retiring from action films?
That has been said before.
Anyhow, the story, so we're in Boston, mm-hmm. and Liam Neeson plays an aging gangster who doesn't have a name. He's credited as the Thug.
Which was the original title of the project.
And apparently that was the original title of this project. Mm-hmm. But he is sort of a loner. He works for Ron Perlman, and they have this sort of like generic, I don't even know, like organized crime outfit that seems to only consist of 3 people. Mm-hmm. Ron Perlman, his son, who's played by
Daniel Diemer,
and Liam Neeson.
Mm-hmm. And they work out of the back of a furniture store that is a front.
And they like traffic women.
Oxy.
And OxyContin. So it's like generic nefarious things. Mm-hmm. But it appears that...
generic nefarious things, LLC.
Yeah. It appears that Liam is having memory issues. So he goes to the doctor.
Well, first before that, he inquires with the doctor that's giving him Oxy if he should be worried about this sudden memory loss.
That's right.
Because that's integral to the plot.
Yes.
But yes, then he actually sees
maybe a neurologist, yeah. And she explains to him that he has CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is that condition that a lot of like football players get. Mm-hmm. Wasn't there a movie with Will Smith about that?
It was called Concussion.
Oh, yeah.
Aptly titled.
And they also refer to it as being punch drunk, but that's what Liam Neeson has, and he has a very advanced case.
Notably, he's an ex-boxer.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So probably this injury is due to his boxing career prior to him being a thug, I guess. It's very Rocky to me.
Well, or The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke, which also has a thing with a daughter.
Anyway, the doctor tells Liam, because he's forcing her to give him a prognosis. And she's like, well, you can't treat it. And if you're making me give you a timeline, you probably have a couple of months before you're incapacitated.
She says years. She says a couple of years.
Oh, she says years, but it could be sooner. So now he's taken that as like he has an expiration date and he wants to absolve himself of, I guess, his bad parenting.
Mm-hmm. And it turns out sooner is a week.
Yeah. Spoiler. But he has 2 children. And he calls the first one his daughter.
Daisy, played by Frankie Shaw, who I will say I did like her screen presence.
I did too. And she's like, boy, don't call here again. I don't want to talk to you. I damn sure don't want to see you. Do not come to my house. So what does Liam do? Roll up to his daughter's house.
Wants to have dinner.
Liam is introduced to her son, who he's never met.
Dre, played by Terrence Pulliam.
And the daughter is put off, but he's being pushy and saying that he wants to talk to her. But ultimately what happens is she explains to her dad, Liam, that his other child, her brother, his son, died a few years ago.
And that doesn't even happen in that conversation.
No.
But yes.
So that's how disconnected he is from the family. But one day he's at, one night, I think it's the night after he sees his daughter, he goes to a bar. And he sees a woman sort of being roughed up by a man. And so he breaks it up, beats up the guy. And the woman is played by Yolonda Ross. And the man who was arguing with her was her boyfriend. So Liam defends her, walks out, and then she follows him. And then they end up developing a relationship. They hook up that first night. And then we see her meet up with him a few times. They get quite close to the point where she accompanies him to a dinner where his daughter is supposed to show up. But she never does. And Liam becomes irate. And at this point, he has shared with Yolanda's character that he has CTE, which explains why he's forgetting things. Because one morning they wake up together and he doesn't even remember that he slept with her or who she is. But things come to a head because Yolanda's character calls the daughter.
And says what's going on with
your dad's medical condition is this is what's happening, this is why he's trying to reconnect. And Liam gets mad. In a kind of a scene that fell flat to me where he basically tries to kick his new little girlfriend out.
We need to, after you wrap up, go back to that scene, but yeah.
But something else that's happening is that Liam's character in the midst of all of this takes a job where he has to deliver a package. And this package is young ladies. So he's sex trafficking. He gets to this house and one of the young ladies in particular affected him. So he goes back, because of this theme of absolution, he goes back trying to buy her to set her free. But he needs $20,000 to do it. So he goes to his boss, Ron Perlman, talking about, can I get an advance? So I need to buy something. And Ron Perlman's like, advance? You're fired. Why? Well, clearly you're going senile, so I can't have you working for me. Because
the doctor that Liam had inquired about memory issues with told Ron Perlman.
Told on his ass.
And so then Ron Perlman tests him tell me your phone number.
He can't even tell him his phone number. Liam gets mad, shoots Ron Perlman's son, Daniel
Diemer. Kyle is his name.
Doesn't fatally shoot him, but then kills Ron Perlman. Then he takes his ass to the house where the women are being held.
The House of the Rising Sun, yeah.
And releases all of them.
Not only that, and again, this film doesn't pop like it should, but again, it just falls flat. But he gives all of those women a bundle.
Yeah, he throws money at them because he stole a bunch of money from Ron Perlman's safe. Releases all those women, gives them some money, kills the bad guys who are holding them there. But in the melee, Liam Neeson gets stabbed in the abdomen. So now that he's basically bleeding to death, he drives to his daughter's house to say goodbye to his grandson. And then throughout the film, we see Liam's character park on this overlook that faces it's facing the bay to downtown, and we see airplanes flying. He likes to sit there and I guess ponder life, but he goes there to die. The end. Man, this story is all over the place. There is so much happening, and I think the best part of the movie is Yolanda Ross's character.
I agree. Yeah, she has the best energy and some actual chemistry with Liam Neeson, but also her character has no name. She's just credited as woman. Which it's like Marilyn Monroe in The 7-Year Itch is just the girl. Like,
I think they could have used what they had, maybe recast Liam Neeson if that were an option, and it could have just been Yolanda with this aging gangster, him dealing with his, neurological issues, and then also trying to reconcile with, because I liked the actor playing the daughter and the kid playing her son. Mm-hmm. It could have just been those four.
Again, even with a better script or a more concise script, and all of those elements still would have worked better. I don't know that we even need this gangster element for Liam Neeson. He did that movie with Leslie Manville, Ordinary Love, where she's dying of cancer. And I thought that was a pretty decent...
I did too. Yeah. And then, of course, this reminds me of another Liam Neeson movie called Memory.
Directed by Martin Campbell with Monica Bellucci.
You commented that you saw someone talk about this movie online.
Someone on Letterboxd said it was, nothing but memory with sideburns.
Yeah, because Liam's hair is interesting.
But what's funny is there's also this trend of very similar films, like Sleeping Dogs with Russell Crowe, or particularly... the Michael Keaton directed Knox Goes Away, where he's also an assassin who's swiftly losing his faculties and needs to wrap things up. The screenwriter, Tony Gayton, in the early 2000s, I think, had a couple very interesting screenplays that he wrote, including Murder by Numbers, the Barbara Schrader film starring Sandra Bullock and Ryan Gosling, and I think Michael Pitt, and also The Salton Sea, which I really need to rewatch with Val Kilmer. And then he did a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson film called Faster that I haven't seen. But this feels like it's recycling so many themes. But at its core, I think it felt like it could have been like something you would have seen in the new American cinema movement of the 70s, if like as directed by John Cassavetes or Carol Rice. Like imagine James Caan and Diana Sands in this approximation of the Liam Neeson, Yolanda Ross character.
There's so many odd little details that just feel like whomever wrote it just didn't have a firm grasp on this world they've created.
Or they made a lot of changes, because it feels like anytime it's about to get gritty, it backs away from that.
I have so many notes, so first off, I hate all the extra stuff, like the fact that Liam's character is this aging gangster. He could have just been like a deadbeat dad who, now that he realizes he doesn't have long, not only to live, but like his memory, he wants to reconcile some things. And then this colorful woman who he meets who kind of helps him through that. Although that kind of reminds me of that Billy Crystal movie with Tiffany Haddish.
This is somehow better than that, but because Tiffany and Billy didn't really have chemistry. But yeah, that these two characters should be representative of salvation for one another, and how kind of distressing it is that just at that moment where he's realizing he's lived such a selfish life and wants to give to someone else, he's losing himself.
We didn't need Ron Perlman. And then not only do we have this like crime lord boss he works for, but then we have his son. It just feels so complicated for no reason.
I do like Ron. I don't think he has anything to do, so that's what makes him seem unnecessary. But Daniel Diemer... I don't think was well directed in this, because there are a couple scenes where he's supposed to be distressed or in pain, and it is good like thing, sketch comedy level.
Good thing he's handsome. Okay, I also didn't like the cinematography. It's very bright. It looks kind of cheap, and then there's some interesting use of CGI in two moments in particular. So Liam Neeson's having these dreams that was reminding me of that movie with the tiger on the boat.
The Life of Pi. Yeah, well, because
he's on his bed in the middle of the ocean, and his dead son's talking to him, but it's very green screeny. And we get that scene maybe like 3 times.
Or also Mother Couch.
With Ellen Burstyn. Then there's another moment where they're like in downtown Boston. And first of all, it looks fully green screen. It's the oddest. I hope I can get a still of what this downtown looks like, because it really does look like, I remember back in like the early 2000s in Vegas, like when you go to like the Stratosphere, they would have these booths set up where you could take a photo and then they would put you like, you know what I'm talking about? Where you could be in front of the Eiffel Tower. That's what it looked like. And we get a moment where he's fighting some bad guys in this downtown Boston where there is no one there, and it looks so artificial.
It clearly the streets have been blocked off for filming that day, is what it seems
Which
like.
is so weird because I'm sure that those moments weren't cheap.
Probably not.
But they make the film feel cheap.
Yes.
And I feel like you could have made a better movie with less resources.
Yeah, we don't.
We didn't need those two things.
Also, we learned that it's not just a dead son; it's a dead gay son.
Okay, all these little details, like his son who's been dead for years, who he couldn't reconcile with because he didn't know he was dead, also happens to be gay. There is a sweet moment when Yolanda's character says to him, like...
Well, because he comments, like, maybe if I'd been in his life more. She's like, yeah. Like,
she's like, boy, that's not how being gay works.
Your macho-ness was...
Your macho energy was not gonna... So, it's so odd that they're, like... It just made me feel bad that, like, there are glimpses with some of the actors... and some of the writing that it's like, oh, there's a really good story in here.
I think I'd say it's a disappointing scene, but it's also probably one of the better scenes. But it should have felt devastating when Liam Neeson threatens to punch Yolonda Ross in the face because she's invited his daughter over and kick her out of the house.
I should have been like upset.
Yes.
I mean, of course I'm upset that he threatened her, but I should have felt like, wow, you're really betraying this, like the one person who's looking out for you.
Right.
But the way it's shot, it just feels like, okay, I guess we're doing this now. I don't know.
Or like had that leaving Las Vegas energy of this, like the sex worker played by Elizabeth Shue comforting this dying alcoholic Nicolas Cage.
More odd things is the first time, I do think that Yolanda and Liam have chemistry, but the first time they have sex, he's being a little like he's not very smooth.
No.
And she keeps saying easy, easy. And I just think the writing was kind of like, feels a little out of place. Then we see that he has this tattoo on his hand, and she's saying like, "Oh, who's Lupe?" His character has more than one tattoo on his hand, which I thought again was a weird detail. Like, is this what the writer thinks gangsters have? But she's like, "Who's Lupe?" And he's like, "Oh, this $10 whore I knew who after I got the tattoo I never saw her again." Like, what was the point of that? Then there's a moment where Yolanda's character says that something is boo-boo. And I think hearing Liam Neeson ask, what is boo-boo? It was just laughable.
It was corny.
It's corny, like the writer was trying to connect like these people from two different worlds. But the gag is, they don't feel like they're that different to me. Like, these two people have enough chemistry that it feels like they would get along.
Right.
So why are you writing things that make them... Again, it made me think of what they were trying to do with that Billy Crystal movie, where it's like he and Tiffany Haddish are so different, but they didn't have any chemistry. So you had to kind of make ways for them. These two actors don't have that energy. So why are you writing these weird...
Yeah, and to me, I don't know. Like, I always go to Gloria starring Jenna Rollins with the kid that she's protecting and kind of like how they're helping each other. And obviously that, although they tried to have like a strange sexual component to that relationship as well, but plays very interestingly. But this, I don't know, it's just missing something really basic. And I think that if we had cut away all of the, like, why does he need to save this sex worker that he suddenly feels responsible for?
Well, she's not a sex worker. She's been trafficked.
She's been trafficked, sorry, yes.
Let me get through the rest of these notes. You already mentioned this, but I thought the scene with the shady doctor who's selling OxyContin, which I think is weird. It would be, like, again, these details are odd because it wouldn't be doctors don't have access to these bulk controlled substances. It'd be a pharmacist who's giving him these drugs. But anyway, that character, the doctor, I thought was oddly written. And then the scene where Liam is trying to get medical advice.
From him? Why are you asking him?
Why would you ask the shady doctor who
why would you tell this doctor you're having memory issues when you just haggled
him on the price of these drugs? It makes no sense. And then clearly Liam's character has money because we cut to the next scene and he's at like the world's fanciest like clinic seeing a specialist.
But also, but not enough money to, you don't have any money saved to help this trafficked girl?
That part. Yeah. You didn't have 20 G's?
20, and then he brings 30, anyway.
Because I bet you that doctor's visit because he had brain imaging was probably 20 G's with this shitty ass healthcare we have.
But also, when I first saw all of that Oxy, I'm like, oh, this must be set when? 2005? When is this?
Again, the way Liam's styled, I don't know why he needed those sideburns, which in some shots look fully glued on. Of course, I always have a problem with the back of Liam's head. I don't understand why his hair does that thing. We have to mention that there's another movie called Absolution.
There are a couple.
But there's one in particular we've talked about on the podcast.
Starring Mario Lopez.
So if you want to see a bunch of handsome men in tidy whities, look up the Mario Lopez movie.
That's from 1997.
Absolution.
That's terrible. If you want to watch something slightly better that's also called Absolution, visit Richard Burton in his 70s film.
The poor lady who's trafficked. So at first when Liam and Daniel's character are told they're going to do a run, as the audience, I didn't have a clue what they were running. I assumed it was drugs or stolen merchandise, which I guess technically it is. But then we find out it's women. But they're in like one of those Penske moving vans. So they had all these women just loose in the back.
Just rolling around.
And then there's a scene where there's a state trooper behind them. And Liam's like, don't panic. But like, there's a state trooper behind us. He's probably going to look us down. Like try to get our faces. Don't know why why he thinks the trooper would do that.
I don't know.
And not pull them over.
Nah.
So then he tells Daniel's character, get down on the floor. And I thought that scene was so annoying.
Because he's like,
well, I don't want to do it. Liam has to literally like...
He's like, the cop is gonna... And then
And then the way it looks, it was shot like he's giving him roadhead.
Yes.
Which I thought was so awkward.
Yeah, no. Well, okay. And then the poor young sex trafficked woman... I thought her hair was terrible.
Okay, she's beautiful.
She's pretty.
She has beautiful hair, but then she has these interesting highlights But, to be fair, all of those young ladies in that house were dressed very interestingly, and I don't have any experience with dealing with that situation, but it just all felt very like inauthentic and strange.
Slipshod. But Liam Neeson even describes her by her hair. He's like, with the bangs, she has highlighted bangs.
Yeah, he's talking about her blonde bangs. Like, okay.
Okay. And then the trafficker, the man that is responsible for these women, is wearing this Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dream
coat robe
that he never takes off.
He never takes off, but he's also wearing like street clothes underneath. Like the first time we see him.
Peeling fruit. There's an old woman making soup.
Stirring pozole.
It's a very odd house for what's going on in there.
So the second time he goes back to the house to save the girl, he asks to meet with her, and then she doesn't know why he wants to see her, so she assumes he wants to have sex, and he tells her no, and then she immediately shows a picture of her son and says it's going to cost $20,000 to get her out. And Liam, in like the most dry way, goes, "No puedo ayudar, lo siento." And then she starts crying. I shouldn't be laughing at these moments. Then I guess
that's exactly the problem.
I know. Then to signify Liam's condition, he's very shaky, and we see him at one point scribbling in his little notepad
while he's driving.
It almost crashes his car.
Okay, so after he gets his initial diagnosis from the doctor who's on the up and up, he goes to his parking spot outside his derelict apartment and puts a gun in his mouth. Like he's going to kill himself. And he's parked in this really odd spot where like there shouldn't be cars pulling up and stopping. But a car pulls up to stop. Ostensibly a neighbor.
And there are two young girls in the back seat of the car. And one of the girls sees Liam with the gun in his mouth. And she gives him the finger and then starts laughing, and then he doesn't pull the trigger. But
the parents, or whoever's driving the car, don't look over and see the man with the gun in his mouth.
That was such an odd scene. Another really odd scene is when Liam goes... maybe you can explain to me. There's a scene where he goes downtown, to that weird CGI downtown, to meet a priest to get $20,000? Well, I don't understand who this priest was. Then the priest immediately gets killed.
And that's a coincidence.
That was so odd. And then...
Well, that's the money that he's bringing to Perlman.
Right. But then these bad guys show up, and then Liam fights the bad guys. And I just thought, I think it's time for him to hang up the action, because his punching was like, ooh, it was all very delayed and slow. It just felt like there's no way this old man took down these two guys with guns.
You know what it's not as bad as, though, and you should, if you can find a clip from Richard Burton, another Richard Burton reference, drunk off his ass in The Klansman. And those fight scenes are, if you've never seen that movie, oh my God. These old drunks doing these movies in the 70s.
I also thought it was funny. Yolanda's character kind of pops up like 3-4 times. And it reminded me of that Lindsay Lohan movie, Irish Wish.
Oh my God.
Where that fairy, St. Bridget, the one who did like how she would pop up. Like,
Well, that movie's vile. But
but it's just like the way her character is handled is so interesting.
not only
to
does
me.
Yolanda pop up, but Liam doesn't like to, we're told, park by his house, but she somehow knows where he parks. Because she's like, why don't you park by your house?
Yeah, I feel bad because I think there's a really interesting story in here, and there are several of the supporting actors who I think could have handled much better material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the scene where his daughter, played by Frankie Shaw, he shows up, her kid Dre plays baseball.
That's right.
And he shows up to one of the games and he gives him a gift because one of the themes, the bonding thing he's dreaming of with his own dead gay son was fishing and the motor on the boat that's made out of a guitar. Anyway, he brings him a fishing reel.
That's right.
And the way that this actor, Frankie Shaw, is looking at him, I think, like it's just a very nicely done, subtle moment of like, you can see that she's hurt, but also kind of touched that he made this gesture. I don't know.
Another good scene is when Yolanda accompanies Liam to dinner and he kind of freaks out because he's kind of, losing his mind, and then he waited for hours and the server is telling him like, at some point, like, I can't hold this table for you. You're not ordering dinner. And I again, I thought she handled that very well, but it's just like, there's no...
and they give her character, she self-harms. She burns herself.
That's right.
And it's just screaming out for a more depth to this characterization, because it's clear, I think, that the actors were adding what was not allowed in the script, I think.
Yeah. Well, and then the moment when the third time Liam shows up to the house with the trafficked women, he has the money. So he tells the guy, okay, I want her. And the guy's like, no, you can't have her. And at first in the audience, you're like, oh, because he's like his favorite girl. But then we realized she's dead. John killed her. And I should have felt something, but I was just kind of like, oh, wow. Okay.
We see her body. You know what it reminded me of? That scene in that Richard Roundtree film, Crack House?
I recommend Crack House. We have a live review for that one.
That is such an entertaining film. But, we shouldn't say it's fun, but I mean, that is definitely worth seeing.
It's wild.
But there's that dead white woman in the bathtub. And I remember watching that, I had a much more profound reaction to seeing this corpse of this woman displayed in this way. And it's like, when we see this dead sex trafficked girl, it's just like,
This review is going to be over 30 minutes for this movie, so we should stop. What would you give Absolution?
Unfortunately, despite some people that I really like in it, 1.5. 1.5.
I agree. I would give it 1.5 out of 5. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.